Welcome to Define, the podcast about the moments that shape us. I'm your host, Maddie, life coach, yoga teacher, and curious soul. Each episode, I speak to someone about a defining moment in their life, the kind that flipped their world upside down, cracked them open, and led them on a journey they never expected. This isn't about headlines or hero stories. It's about real life, real shifts, and what it takes to rebuild after the break. So let's get into it. Hi, Jess. Welcome to Define.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you for having me.
So good to have you. Yeah, it's been a couple months in the making to get you here. So yeah, super excited to have you in this space. And yeah, let's just jump in. So like, who are you, Jess?
I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, Jess, I'm a mum, a wife, a woman. Yeah, just someone trying to figure out who I am and what. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It's a big question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of why I wanted to invite you here, because I think that's, you're kind of asking some of the big questions that like we're all asking ourselves. And so we've known each other since we were about 19, 18?
Yeah, about 18.
19, not to throw any shade to us, but we're now in our 30s. So it's been a long time, and I was really excited to have you here to, well, obviously, you know, you're going to bring whatever defining moments feel like they resonate for you, but I was really excited to invite you on because I think we've led very like parallel journeys, and just for audience benefit, we actually met in Thailand, which is kind of nuts. I think we met in Thailand, right? Yeah. But weirdly, and this is why I think like world has kind of a weird way of making things happen. We were actually both living about 10 minutes away from each other in London. And so that's where I think that kind of parallel journey began. And then we've kind of gone off into these kind of separate spaces and stuff, and recently reconnected and found that actually we still have loads in common and loads of things that we both love and are excited about. So yeah, that's kind of why I was so happy to have you here. So as I've told you, you know, Define is all about defining moments or periods in your life. So before we like jump into a bit more about kind of your life, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about what the defining moment is that you're bringing today.
Well, I think for a lot of parents, it's one of the most defining moments of your life is when you have a baby, your first baby. I don't know about multiples because I only have one, but it's such a life-changing thing to happen that you think you know. You get pregnant and you're like, I know what this is. I know, I've seen babies. I was a baby. I know this. I know how this goes. And then it happens and you're like, well, nobody told me this was going to happen. Because it changes everything. Like one of the things I didn't know before having a baby was that your literal brain chemistry changes when you become a mum. I don't think it's the same for dads, but like when you're pregnant, your brain fully rearranges itself so that you can become the best mother that you can be, so that you're more aware of danger, you're more attuned to certain sounds. So like your hearing gets better, your smelling, like your smell gets better, like everything sort of goes up a notch. But at the same time, your brain is big parts of it closed down so that everything can reshuffle, which is why people get baby brain. And it takes like, I would say for me, like it took over 2 years for me to start feeling like myself again and start understanding that how that change had kind of really affected me, as well as obviously the fact that you now have a full person. This is probably the biggest responsibility because I also won't know. I won't know if I've messed up until it's really too late.
God, that's huge, isn't it? I love the way you described that in the sense of like, you have been a baby yourself, but also like you have this sense of, you know, I've got younger siblings or I've got nieces, nephews, whatever it is. I feel like I know what I'm going into. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, my entire life has shifted. And I think, you know, we've spoken outside of this space about how passionate you are about spreading awareness and support for people going through, you know, the experience that you've been through. And I wonder, before we like jump into kind of that, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about what was going on for you before this defining moment. So I don't know whether, you know, whether the defining moment for you was actually like becoming a mother, or was it the getting pregnant? So yeah, where did things sort of begin for you?
I guess it was a slow burn. Like it didn't just like I didn't just wake up one day and think. I mean, I guess the journey from I always wanted to be a parent, and then I think when we met, I was kind of not that interested anymore, or possibly a bit later. Definitely like at uni or after uni, I was like, you know what, maybe I don't want to have kids. Maybe I'll just let all my brothers and sisters have children and I'll just turn up and have fun. And then I met Jack, and then I knew I wanted to have a family with him. Yeah, then we got pregnant and it was so exciting and so terrifying. And I guess it was during pregnancy that I started to like people in your life when you're pregnant, it really shows you the people that are going to show up and the people that aren't. And that's at that point things start to change because you already have to start changing your life as a woman. Less so as a man, I think, because they don't have to stop drinking and they're not like tired and you don't like I mean your hormones go wild and you're just a little bit insane.
I mean, they're not, yeah, and they're not physically carrying
Yeah,
carrying a baby, are they?
that already starts to shift and that means that you've got certain people in your life that they're just there for the fun. They're just there for, drinking and having fun. And they're not really there to like be a part of this bit of your life. So that's the point when people start dropping off. And even like for me, it was certainly it was a big shift for my relationship with my mum. That was when things started to really change because she just didn't show up for me when I was pregnant. And then that was like a massive turning point because it was just, I could have forgiven all of the other stuff that happened before. But this, like, I'll never forgive her for not. I asked her to come and she didn't come.
Mm.
And at like, I think I was like 36 weeks pregnant. So I was like pregnant. And it was probably the first time in my life that I was ever like, I need my mum. Well, in my adult life. And yeah, and she didn't turn up. And you can't, in me, I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive her for that because so many other people in my life showed up that I wouldn't have expected to
Mm.
and that I wouldn't have asked. They just did it. Like, it didn't need to be asked. Like, my stepmom showed up, my Jack's mum showed up. Yeah, and then those kind of things. And then once the actual event occurs, and everybody's birth is different. Mine was particularly traumatic. And again, people show up or they don't. And it just kind of shows you. And some people do it. I have a friend, she didn't know she was doing it. She would always just turn up and just hang out and she was just such a like gentle presence and she never
Mm.
expected anything of me. And she just wasn't like, we used to go like, she was one of my party friends. We went to Budapest together. We did all of those things together. Like, and it just wasn't, she wasn't someone I expected to show up in that way. And she did. And that was amazing. And that's kind of, I've gone off on a ramble now, but
No, it's okay. Ramble away. This is what it's all about.
but yeah, I think that's a really important part of how, your identity starts to shift and the people around you start to shift. And it's a big thing for me as well was boundaries. I mean, I've always known that I'm a people pleaser, but it was my complete inability to say no to things. And it became a real problem because I was like, no, I need to say no to this because I don't feel comfortable with that around my child.
Mm.
And it's causing me anxiety that you want to do this and I don't want you to, like, especially around drinking and all of that. And it was just like such a big learning curve for me to know that I could put boundaries in place and people weren't just going to stop being a part of my life because I said no.
Mm-hmm. The word that's so much in there that I ask you about, but just on what you're saying here, it's like this. The word that's coming to my mind is there's this evolution, right? There's this evolution of you as an individual, but also that community, that support system around you, either coming with you or not. And I love the way that you describe that friend of yours because not I don't know the saying, but there's something around like some friends are like there for different things. And whilst I agree with that, and people come in and out of your life, it's like those real deep connections, those friends evolve with you. And yeah, they might have other interests to you. They might not be parents, they might not be able to relate, but like just the presence that you talked about seems like was really key for you, the people who were present there for you.
Yeah. And I've spoken to her about it since, because about 18 months after I had Indy, I had this moment where I was like, I was in therapy pretty much straight after Indy was born, because I was like, I do not want to repeat my mum's mistakes, but generally my family's mistakes. I want to fix this so that I don't pass it on. And yeah, and then about 18 months after Indy was born, I had this moment where I was like, ah, shit, I was not okay. Like, there was so many things that were not okay. Like, so many moments where I really should have asked for help and I didn't. And I was so sad for that version of me that had felt that she couldn't ask anybody and that she didn't have anyone that she could trust to show up in the way that she needed them to. And I remember speaking to this particular friend and I said, you were one of, she was upset because all of my friends were upset that I hadn't spoken to them at the time. And I was like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know it was happening.
Mhm.
It was baptism by fire. I was just trying to survive. I had no idea that what the things I was experiencing weren't normal, like intrusive thoughts and some pretty scary things. And I didn't know. I just didn't know that was, and I didn't know how to ask somebody about that, because when you're in it, you feel like if you tell somebody that, like, one of my most common ones, there were two really common ones, was if I just drive into oncoming traffic, I don't want to die. I just want to be seriously injured so that I can go to hospital and have a break. So that was like I could just, if I just do that, then I could just sleep for a bit. It would be great.
Mm. Did you
Or
sense that what was going on for you at that stage? So Indy was born. This was when she was
this was when
around 18 months.
no, so this was the first year of her life. So this was probably between like 3 months, and it got to its worst point at about 8 9 months, which is when we didn't have anywhere to live, so we'd moved out of our house, but our new house wasn't ready for us to move into, so we were living with Jack's mum. And around that, which I'd actually forgotten about until I spoke to my sister-in-law recently. Obviously, my dad's house is quite big. It's a big house, and Jack's mum lives in a little 3-bed flat. So, the obvious choice would be that we would move in with my dad because there's lots more space. But my sister was doing her exams. So we were told we were not allowed to move in because my sister was doing her exams. So at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. But looking back on it, I'm like, all that would have said to my nervous system is these are not safe people.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't rely on them. I can't talk to them. And yeah, and then Jack was struggling with his own stuff. So I don't think he knew how to show up for me at this point. Like, I don't think he knew, he doesn't do very well with emotional stuff. So I just felt really alone, and like nobody was coming to save me. So what was I supposed to do? So I think that's kind of what made it peak at that point. And there'd be the other intrusive thought that was really common for me was, I just what if I just leave her in the woods? I'd be walking and I'd be like, I could just walk away. I could just walk away and it would be done. Obviously, I would never do any of those things. But the idea of actually telling somebody that you're thinking about that is terrifying, because then what if they suddenly go, well, you're not fit to be a parent, and they actually take them away, because that's not actually what you want. All you want is for somebody else to just help and show up without you having to ask, you just want somebody to look at you and see you and think they need a break.
Mm. And I'm so sorry that you experienced that, but I am so grateful for you having the courage to share those thoughts here in this space where someone could be listening and could be experiencing something similar. And, you talk about that fear of you weren't genuinely planning to do that, but the pressure that you were under, the kind of lack of having safe spaces for you to be in,
Yeah.
led those thoughts potentially to become even louder because you were like, where do I put these?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
do I have to tell these?
Or even like, like, how can I just make it quieter? Who can I look to who will see me and help me navigate through this?
Mm,
I just didn't. It's really difficult to say because at the time when I was in it, I didn't see anybody that I could have turned to. And clearly nobody picked up on it. And there was even one point where I did say to Jack, like, I'm frightened of the things that I'm thinking about and I need you to help me. And he just went, okay, well, let's get in touch with your therapist. And I was like, that's not what I'm asking. And then he was like, right, I've called your dad. He's going to come and take Indy for a few hours. And again, it's like, that's brilliant, but that's not what I'm asking. One of the things I see quite often on Instagram is like, it's not your kids you want a break from, it's everything around them.
mm,
You want to be able to enjoy your children without the mental load that comes with having kids.
And in that moment when you were asking like for support, what is it that you felt like you needed?
I think at the time I needed Jack, and that was one of the big things. And he was doing everything he could possibly do, but it wasn't, in relationships where people are, it's not that they're not showing up for you, they're just not showing up in the way that you need them to. And it's really difficult, especially when you have such different like love languages, or like, I think I just needed him to be more present. I needed him to do more of the parenting side of things without me having to ask. And also,
That's like the reason I smiled then was just because I know obviously it's not shown up necessarily for me in a parenting sense as I'm not a parent yet, but like I think that's just such a reoccurring thing, and I think so many people in relationships will be able to relate to that. Of like sometimes it's the not having to ask. You talked about the mental load. For many, particularly women, we hold so much,
yeah,
and sometimes actually it's just being able to let go of that list, that having to consciously ask, which is the biggest relief.
yeah,
Really relate.
that they would do it, even if it wasn't how you would do it, like it still would get done.
Hmm.
Like I remember Jack's mom took her to the beach for a day and stayed with Jack's sister. And Jack was like, I'm going to pack the bag.
Yeah. Oh no. What was in the bag?
I didn't check the bag. I was like, I got to let him do these things. Like, he's trying to show up. I've got to let him do it. Like, I didn't even ask. And I knew the essentials were in there. Like, she had nappies and wipes and bottles and milk and all of those things. But like, she was going to the beach. It was hot. He'd packed her dungarees and a long sleeve top and a jumper.
I mean, maybe the beach in the UK in winter.
I mean, it's good. I looked at the pictures when they came back, and she was also wearing like random clothes that weren't ours when she came back. And I was like, what happened? Carol was just like, well, she didn't really have any weather appropriate clothes in the bag. And I was like, okay. But then in my head, I now just do all of the packing for those things because it's just easier.
Mm,
But I now have the mental space to be able to do those things. And I am able to pass over things that I don't are less important, in my opinion, that I'm like, if it goes slightly different to how I think it should go, that's no one's going to die. But I mean, that's the thing. In that first year after you've had a baby, everything is so heightened. Like, your hormones are a complete mess. And it is like letting go of that control, especially like later on, if you've done a lot of it when they've been really small, is really difficult because you have your rhythm and you have the things that work. It's so important to let your partner figure out their rhythm as well, really early on, because it's so much harder later to be
mm.
able to do it. And I think a lot of mums that I know, it's easier if we just do it.
I've noticed that in the experience of like my
It's less
friends.
stressful
Mm,
for everyone
mhm.
involved if we just do it. But then that means we're taking away the partner's ability to be able to do it, because then it becomes more stressful and more upsetting for not only the partner but also the baby. And when you have a baby, it's less so now. She's nearly 4 now, but when she was a newborn especially, and for that whole, probably until she was about 2, it causes you like physical pain when they cry, and your whole body reacts to it. Obviously, that's a part of whatever it is, evolution, and making sure that they survive. But it's so hard to then not step in, because you're like, I'm going to throw up. Like, it's like someone is ripping my guts out, and I want to help and I want to make it stop, because my baby's clearly in peril.
Mm.
But no, they're not in peril. They're just with dad, and they're a bit annoyed about it.
And if anyone's, because I'm thinking like there might be people listening to this who are like, oh my God, I'm, experiencing the same thing. From what you've learned, is there, yeah, what can you share about how to maybe sit with that, or how can mum look after herself in those moments while like dad's building his routine, his bond?
Go for a walk.
Go for a walk.
Put headphones in. Like, I would say, just remove yourself from it. Trust that your partner knows what they're doing and that they can figure it out. Because the big mistake that I made is that I jumped in and saved Jack every time. And it made him feel, A, that I didn't trust his parenting, and that I was undermining him constantly. And that because I was doing that, because I thought I was helping, it just made him feel like he couldn't do it. And then it made it harder. And then he would then lean on me. So then it would get to a point where I'd be like, actually, no, you can do this. You take control. And then, 5 minutes in, he'd be like, you do it.
Mm,
So if you remove yourself from it,
mm.
it makes it easier for them and for you. But
Yeah,
then,
I was just thinking that like there's this element of everything that you've just said, but also like even if it is just a walk around the block, like you suddenly get this time
mhm,
for
you're
yourself.
moving your body, you're
Hmm.
getting fresh air, you're, taking a little bit of space that's for you.
Hmm.
And that is so important. And I think a lot of women especially forget that there's that whole thing, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Hmm.
And yet there are millions of mothers doing it every day because you haven't got a choice. They're getting the dregs at that point. You want them to have nice fresh water. You don't want the moldy bits at the bottom. So take that time, because it is so important, and it makes such a difference. Like, I can tell, because I have so much more patience. I have so much more ability to weather the storms, especially like through the toddler years. I can tell if I need to step out because I'm joining her in her fire. I'm adding fire to fire. Everybody's on fire. Everybody's crying. Whereas if I've had, like, I don't know, if I've been to the gym and I've had a couple of hours to myself to have a coffee, I am able to not be on fire at the same time. And it takes a bit longer.
There's that resilience in, and I see that for in my work for so many people, like especially parents, but also people with really high powered, stressful jobs, or like whatever the situation is that you're in. It's just like we don't give enough credit for this like idea of filling our cups. I know it's getting better in the world. I know it's being talked about more and people acknowledge it, but it's like getting people to know that and then to embody it and actually do it. And I think it's so to all parents, like especially yourself, to do that whilst also having one or more children that like really are depending on you, that must put a huge level of like pressure on you. So to be able to go and do that, I think is completely like I hate to say the word brave because it's like but it is brave. I think it's like, what's the word, it's just knowing that you need to prioritize yourself in order to be able to prioritize your child
Yeah.
or your significant other or your whatever it is that
Yeah.
is your thing.
I think that's important in any area of life, really, because in order for you to be able to in order for you to get the best out of other people, you're going to have to show up the best version of you. And that's really hard to do if you've not given yourself any time figure out version of you is. If you're just constantly, running on empty, your cortisol levels are through the roof and you're living on caffeine and crackers.
I'm glad you said crackers.
But yeah, you're not going to be able to give your best version of yourself, and therefore you're not going to get the best version of other people.
And so in this defining moment, period, like going from before you knew you wanted to be a mum, or there was a period where you weren't sure, but you kind of knew that was something you wanted, and then you met your partner and you were like, yes, this is what we want to do. What do you feel like in you has changed the most? I know like a huge amount has changed, but what do you kind of, if you think to then to now, what do you feel has been like the most significant change for you or shift?
I think it's my ability to recognize boundaries and recognize when people are crossing boundaries, and my recognizing that my worthiness and the amount that people love me is not based on how much I can give them. And that was like a really big, I did NHS talking therapies, CBT, which I'd never done CBT before. And I just thought it was like so good. I recommend it. Because it one of the things that we did was look at your core beliefs, which obviously affect how you interact with the rest of the world. And one of mine that came up, which was really hard to hear, was a core belief of myself that I am nothing. And I literally, when the therapist said that, and she was like, this is what I'm hearing from what you're saying, I just then burst into tears, because I was like, if somebody I loved said that to me, that would break my heart. And I was like, how can I think that and believe that about myself? And we unpicked like a whole load of stuff around it. But recognizing that and unlearning that belief, or starting to unlearn that belief, and that has been one of the biggest shifts, because it means that I can put those boundaries in place. I can say no to things. I don't have to show up all the time for people when I don't have the capacity to, and they will still love me and they will still be my friends. They will still want to spend time with me because they like me for who I am, because I am worth liking. And I never ever want my child to ever feel like that. And I think it's so important for her to see, especially strong women in her life, but people who are able to say no and like hold on to those boundaries. Is so important for her to see that, and to see that it's not a scary thing, and the world's not gonna, again, we'll go back to fire. Nothing's gonna set on fire because I've said, no, I don't want to come for dinner with you. I'm tired today. Let's FaceTime another day. No one's going to hate me because of that.
When you were talking that, I felt really moved, because I think some of the things you talk about are experiences I can relate to, and I think experiences that many of us can relate to. And putting in boundaries is really difficult. And even as you talk and you say, like, I don't want to FaceTime tonight, like, of course that's fine. But sometimes we really don't feel like that is an okay thing to say. And when you spoke earlier about being a people pleaser, God, yeah, so many of us, again, particularly women, we're like brought up in a way is that we should just kind of cater to everyone's need and want. And I imagine becoming a mother and then having a dependent, suddenly also you're trying to cater to all of their needs and wants. And a lot of those you can't put boundaries in because they're your child and they need you. So it's like, I could hear that, like, there's this pressure of like, well, if this child needs and wants for me, and I've got all these relationships in my life, like, you almost get to a boiling point, don't you, where you're like, I have to put some of these kind of boundaries in place in order to protect myself.
Yeah. One of the biggest things is that I've gone no contact with my mother. And that was such a difficult decision to make. And it wasn't one that happened overnight. And it was causing me more harm than good, having her as my life. She was making, every time I spoke to her or we had a conversation or we had contact, it would send me spiraling. And the only times I used to have panic attacks fairly regularly before Indy, and the only times really that I've had them since has been after I've had a conversation with my mum. And you have to protect yourself. That I never would have seen it in the same way before I had Indy.
Hmm.
But it's so important to protect my mental health and have safe people in my life so that she knows what a safe relationship is. Because, you know, you tend to, it's very sad, but you tend to repeat patterns from your childhood. I was actually watching a really interesting show, and someone in it was saying that you reenact painful childhood patterns to try and get a different outcome continuously throughout your life. But unless you know what kind of went wrong, and unless you can change your reactions to the situation, you're just going to keep repeating it over and over again, sort of in a loop, because nothing's changing. You're reacting the same, and you're pulling out the reactions that you need from that situation in order for it to become what it was. And I think when you start changing your reactions to those things, you it becomes really obvious what those patterns were. And then again, people will start dropping out of your life because they're not really your friends. Because if somebody can't deal with the fact that you've put a boundary in to protect yourself, if they see that as an offensive thing, then they're not respecting your boundaries.
Exactly. And I think that's where it becomes abundantly clear of who your people are, because they might have been there because they weren't used to those boundaries being in place. And then suddenly they don't have 100% access to you, or they don't have freedom to come and go because that's not in the relationship that you want. And it's a mutual thing, isn't it? You build relationships with people that are mutually beneficial, or you both can receive. I think, that's when we need to let go of those people. And as you were talking about kind of playing out those childhood kind of almost traumas, it's that idea of generational trauma, and how a lot of that stuff comes down through the generations. And actually, and it feels like, I know generational trauma could feel a little bit like a buzzword at the minute, but it is this sense of like, you're doing the work to heal that so that your daughter then doesn't have to experience.
I mean, generational trauma is a bit of a buzzword, but I think that's because as our generation are the ones that have actually looked back and gone, hang on a second, my mom did that because her mom did that. And we've gone, well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's such a big thing at the moment, is because suddenly a lot of parents and a lot of people of our generation and the younger generation are trying to break those cycles. You're never going to do it perfectly. You're always going to pass on a little bit. But if you can try and reduce the damage, well, that's all we can hope. I think I've said this poem to you before, but it's that poem. They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. And I've always really loved that poem, because no matter what you do, you are going to give your kids a little bit. But if you can try and heal yourself, then hopefully they're going to get some of that too.
Exactly. They're developing because they are part of you and your partner, and you want them to develop that, and they'll have to navigate in some sense their own way of what they do and don't want to take forward and things like that. One thing you said, I'm just trying to recall it because it was really great. And now I really wanted to ask you a question about it, but I like got a bit lost in your in the poem. So in a lot of the conversation, we've covered a lot, and it's been really insightful actually to hear your experience. And I think there's a lot that you've said that hopefully people who are listening will be able to relate to and take kind of thought and insight away from. But this concept kind of came to my mind of like, there's this sense for parents that you give a huge amount to your child. And at times that has been like beautiful and wonderful. And at times that has been like really difficult. And as you were talking, I noticed this sense of like, what your child has given to you. And I sense that being like she's empowered you to put in those boundaries because she's been there and that's like what has been necessary for you. And I was just curious to hear if you what else you feel like that you may have received from Indy or from becoming a mum.
That's such a good question. It is so true. You do give a lot to your kids, but if anything, she's given me more. She forced me to have a real look at who I am and who I want to be. And watching her be everything that she is, unashamedly, she is loud. She feels all of her emotions in a really big way. And that's amazing. And I think a really big thing that has come up for me is, and I think a lot of, I don't know, I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of people, especially in our generation and probably generations before, anger is such a tricky emotion. Like, it was such a big thing for me because I've never been an angry person, in my opinion. And after I had India, I was so quick to anger. I had really bad postpartum rage. Like, it would be like 0 to 100, and I was screaming and I was so angry, and I've never felt that. And I didn't know what to do with it. I had no healthy ways of processing that emotion. And that's something I'm still trying to learn. And I'm sitting there going, how am I supposed to guide her through all of these things that she's feeling when I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue what is a healthy coping mechanism for anger. I mean, maybe just screaming into the abyss. I don't.
Sometimes helpful.
We were never taught how to emotionally regulate those things, and we were just taught, just don't feel those things. Only feel good things. Don't feel negative feelings. But negative feelings are so important. Like, anger is, you need to get it out because otherwise it sits and it stews. And it's one of the big things that I find about parenting is it really makes you confront your own. It holds a mirror up, and you go, like, your knee-jerk reaction to how to handle a situation, and then you suddenly think, well, that didn't feel right. That's not how I want to do that in the future. That's not how I want her to handle those situations in the future. Okay, what does that mean? Like, where do I go from here? Now I'm going to have to relearn how to be angry and how to be sad, because being sad, again, it's like we were always told, oh, don't cry, everything's fine, you're fine. And Jack says that sometimes to her, and I'm like, don't tell her how she feels. She cries a lot, and that's fine. She's 3, and she kind of gets stuck. And I'm like, okay, we do need to move this on now. Like, we have been crying for 20 minutes, and it was just, I've now given you the correct color cup. I think we can move away from this. But don't tell her that she's fine, because clearly she's not fine. Don't tell her if she falls over and hurts her, and it hurts. Don't tell her she's fine and she's okay. It's her body. She needs to listen to that. And that also has shown me how much we as adults don't listen to our own bodies. And we ignore pain and all of these things because as kids we were told, oh, it's fine, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And you're like, well, no, move through it.
It's like that element of shame as well, of like, even as simple as like, if we fall over, we quickly get up and I'm fine, And I think that does root from being a child and you're just picked up and you're like, keep going. It's like,
Don't dwell on it.
yeah, yeah. And we do that emotionally as well. And it's just sometimes there's this sense of like, no, we need to give space to feel.
Yeah.
And to figure it out as well. Not necessarily to just
the emotion and move through the pain instead of just sidelining it. Being like, I'll deal with that later, or if ever.
in 25 years.
Yeah, in therapy somehow, and it will come out. Yeah. One thing that I always say if Indy falls over and she cries, and I always say is, was that shock or did it hurt? Because sometimes we cry because we're shocked, which is fair. And I've always said that to her. I think I saw it on Instagram or something. But it works because quite often if it's just shock, asking that question then calms her down because she goes, oh, actually, it doesn't really hurt. I was just a bit it was just a bit of a shock to be standing and then on the floor. It's shocking. So those kind of things, I think, becoming a parent and watching Indy have all of those big feelings and how important that is has been. But yeah, in answer to your question, I went off on a very roundabout ramble, but she's given me a lot. She's made me think about how I want to be as a person, and that being raw and messy and just human is so beautiful. We shouldn't try and hide it. We shouldn't constantly be trying to be this perfect. We got AI for that. We don't need to do it. That's what makes us so special, is all of those really raw, big emotions, and feelings and moments.
Stunning. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to underplay like the huge amount you've been through and the experience. And, it's a forever thing. You're always going to be a parent now and an identity crisis. But to be able to be at a point to notice that feels like, I sense that feeling really powerful for you, and a huge shift for you in how you understand yourself and how you know yourself to be. And it's been really empowering to hear that you've been able to put into those boundaries and start asking for the help that you need, and voicing those intrusive thoughts and getting the help. And I suppose my kind of final question within this part is, if there are new mums listening or people who are like, just really what you're saying is resonating, is there anything you'd like to share for them? And it doesn't have to be advice. Maybe it's just something that you notice.
I think for me, it's just remember that showing up and doing the best that you can is amazing. It's never weak, or it's never asking for help doesn't make you a worse parent. And yeah, I don't know how to word it, but you're not on your own, basically. And if you find your people, that really helps. I've made a point always to be really honest about my experience, because there are so many mums that I've spoken to, and I've said a lot of the things that I've said on this podcast to them, and they've said, "Oh God, I felt like that, but nobody else ever said that to me. I didn't know other people were feeling like that." Don't be frightened to reach out to people. Don't be frightened to be honest, and you'll find the people that you need.
Amazing. Thank you. This has been, such a wonderful conversation, so insightful, and I think a really important conversation and important things to say. And like you just said, there are people you've spoken to out there. I'm sure there's many others that are feeling these things and not necessarily having a space where they can feel heard, or even just someone to relate to them. So I guess a thank you for being so honest and so vulnerable throughout this conversation and sharing what it is that you have experienced.
Even if it helps just one person, then it's worth it, in my opinion. Even if there's just one person out there
Absolutely.
going, "I'm not mental."
Yeah, just like a slight drop of someone's shoulders, just like, "Ah, okay." I want to acknowledge as well that, I suppose for anyone listening, that this conversation has obviously centered around your experience, which is like a heteronormative relationship. But I still hope that anyone listening, does find things within this conversation that are helpful. But I suppose I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that's okay, because we're talking about your experience, and your experience is not everybody's experience, as neither is mine. But yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. So before we go, I have a question I ask everybody. What would you say to past you, so the past Jess, standing right on the edge of that defining moment of becoming a mother?
I actually wrote this down. I would say, this will break you, but it won't destroy you. It will show you who you really are. Don't turn away from her. She is more powerful, more worthy than you were ever allowed to believe. She is exactly who you were always meant to be, and she is wonderful. I'll cry.
I'm going to start crying. That was absolutely beautiful. I hope you frame that and put that somewhere for you, for yourself as a reminder.
Have it as a widget on my phone.
Oh, I'm not even going to comment because I think that landed so beautifully and it's so powerful in just your own words. So all I will say is thank you so, so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, just a huge thank you for your vulnerability. And I'm sure this will help one and many more people out there.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Jess. Bye.
Right, bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Define. I hope this story reminded you of your own strength, your own shifts, your own becoming. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and journey on.